You already know about me. I am not an extremist. There is a way to do most things that is balanced. So I'm not here to like strip something away that's working for you, but I do want to provide a perspective on intermittent fasting that I think is really important. So many women are pushing past our capacity and are living in a deficit of nourishment and fuel. But the truth is, if there are any cracks in that foundation of blood sugar, hormones, or cortisol, intermittent fasting is typically just going to make the cracks worse. Hey, Mama, welcome back to the Thrive Mama podcast. I'm Martina, certified nutrition consultant and holistic health coach, and a mama of two. And I'm so glad you're here. I am here to help busy moms unlock their energy, balance their hormones, and break out of burnout using nutrition as a foundation. So on this podcast, we dive into actionable strategies on nutrition, nervous system healing, and aligning with your cycles, with a healthy dose of relatable motherhood thrown in, all designed to help you move past surviving to actually thrive in motherhood. Let's do this. All right, Mama, today's episode is coming at you via popular request. I posted on my Instagram stories the opportunity to vote on today's topic, and this one won like by a landslide. So we are diving into my hot take on intermittent fasting for women, specifically if you are busy or working to balance your hormones, how to use intermittent fasting in a way that's not going to make things worse. So I can't wait to dive into it. I think this one's going to be short and sweet for you. And before we dive into all the juicy stuff, I have a quick announcement to make. Next week, starting April 3rd, I will be hosting a 7-day Energy Leaks Breakthrough Challenge. This is a live challenge that you can opt into to be in a community space with me. And the whole intention is to locate your energy leaks and seal them, plug them up, heal the leaks so that you can stop leaking energy all over the place and really come back into your power and your vitality, not from a place of doing more, but just managing what already exists. So in this challenge space, you're going to get daily action steps to plug up your energy leaks. You'll get ongoing coaching and support from me, and you'll get to be in a beautiful community of other people going on this journey with you. This challenge is going to be so fun. I've been putting together materials for it, and I'm so excited to dive into it. There's so much to go into here, things that are draining your energy that you are not even aware of. And this challenge is $11 for 7 days of ongoing coaching, support, and daily action steps. And as I've been putting this together, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so much. Like, this is worth so much more than $11, but we're keeping it at 11 because I like the number and we're keeping it accessible. You are investing a little bit into yourself so that you show up for yourself, so you have a little bit of skin in the game. And if you've been craving a little bit of like a spring reset, or just really craving access to more energy without having to do a bunch more, this is the space for you. So the challenge technically starts April 7th, but if you join early, you're going to get access to 5 days of pre-game content. So I'll be popping in for the 5 days leading up to the start of the challenge to lay some foundations for us and get us all ready to get the most out of this challenge that we can. So if you're hearing this episode before April 2nd, check out the link. Join right away so that you can be there for the pregame. And if you're hearing this episode anytime between April 2nd and April 13th, come on in and join us. All the content will be there. You can get caught up, dive in, and soak up the medicine of plugging your energy leaks so you can come back to more of your life force energy, really find balance, and reclaim the energy that is yours. Okay, so I'm excited to see you all on the challenge. It is going to be lit. It's going to be so fun. And for today, we're talking intermittent fasting, and I get this question a lot. And it's one that can ruffle a few feathers. Sometimes we feel a little defensive about intermittent fasting because for a lot of us, maybe not a lot, but for plenty of people that I talk to, intermittent fasting might be part of our daily rituals or routines. It may be something that we feel like has been working really well for us or that we've seen success with. Or here's what's most common. We saw a lot of success for a while. And so we get really attached to like intermittent fasting. It's so amazing. Look what it did for me. And then we sort of plateau and we're not feeling a lot of success and we're trying to figure out why. But the intermittent fasting worked so well in the beginning, so we hold on to it. That's super common. But no matter where you're at, if you've just been curious about intermittent fasting, if you've never tried it, if you're a diehard faster, I want you to come into this conversation open mind. You already know about me. I am not an extremist. There is a way to do most things that is balanced. So I'm not here to like strip something away that's working for you, but I do want to provide a perspective on intermittent fasting that I think is really important. So, first, let me just clarify what I mean by intermittent fasting so that we're all on the same page. Intermittent fasting just refers to going an extended amount of time on a consistent basis without eating, without intaking any calories. So, usually this is done in a period of like 12 to 18-hour fasts, is pretty normal. And for most of us, this happens overnight. So if you stop eating dinner by 8 p.m. and you don't eat again before bed, and then you eat breakfast at 8 a.m., you are doing a 12-hour fast, whether you're doing it on purpose or not. If you are intentionally intermittent fasting, you may be pausing your food for the evening and then not eating again until late morning or lunchtime the next day. Another way I've seen intermittent fasting go is to eat early in the morning, but stop your eating around 4 p.m. and then fast overnight. So there's a lot of different ways to do this, but the idea here is that we are restricting the eating window. So we're restricting the window of time that we're intaking food and calories. And the idea here is that our bodies were evolved to eat in sort of a feast famine cycle. In the time where our bodies were really evolving and our metabolisms were forming, food was not as readily accessible as it is now. We didn't have fridges and freezers and grocery stores. And so we would go through seasons where we would eat a lot, we would store up the energy, and then we would go a period of time without food until we could get access to food again. So that is a really natural cycle that our bodies evolved with. And there are plenty of studies that show the benefits of intermittent fasting. There's lots of studies that show that it increases fat metabolism and weight loss, that it improves mental focus, that it reduces craving, that it fixes blood sugar. Like there's a ton of studies out there that will sing the praises of intermittent fasting all day long. So I totally get why it feels tempting. And it's such a simple switch for a lot of us, right? Like we don't have to change everything we're eating. We just have to shorten the window that we are eating it in, right? Like that sounds so easy and tempting in a lot of ways. It's very simple. So, what I want to offer you today is just an alternate perspective, particularly from the point of view of fasting for women. Because here's the truth: intermittent fasting, almost all of the studies that we have showing the benefits of intermittent fasting were done on men. They were not done on women. Women were intentionally not included in many of these studies because we have a menstrual cycle. And this is actually true for a lot of medical data and research out there in the world. A lot of pharmaceutical trials, a lot of studies on cause and effect for different things are done primarily on men because women's bodies are too, and I'm like air quoting very heavily here, unpredictable because we have cycles. And it's too hard of a variable to control for, and so they just don't test. For example, I read recently that menstrual products like tampons and pads were not tested using real menstrual blood until the year like 2004. So up until 2004, every product that was used for menstrual cycles was tested using like other liquids, like waters and oils and things like that, not actual menstrual blood. They just didn't even use menstrual blood to test the menstrual products for absorbency and efficiency. Anyway, that is not relevant to intermittent fasting. But the point is, our research process has a long ways to go when it comes to really clear, informed, and applicable information for women's bodies because they are highly different. We are not just smaller men. Our bodies operate in a completely different way because our hormones cycle in a very different way. And so the fact that these intermittent fasting studies are done primarily on men should say a lot. I hear so many success stories of men who start intermittent fasting and all of a sudden they're benching at the gym times 3 and they feel amazing and they lose weight and they're sleeping better and they're less stressed and they look 10 years younger. And then their wives try it and they feel great for a while. and then their period disappears, or they start breaking out, or they lose 5 pounds and then can't lose any more. They just sort of plateau. Like it doesn't have the same magic sauce for most women. Now, if you're someone who has experienced huge results with intermittent fasting, I'm not here to tell you that that's wrong. I'm not here to discount your experience at all. But what I'm really speaking to here is the average woman's body is actually not in a place to handle the additional stressors that come from going long periods of time without food. And it can, in many cases, cause more imbalances than it's fixing. There are a couple of studies done specifically on women and cycles when it comes to intermittent fasting. And what they show is that intermittent fasting, and we're talking like 14 to 18-hour fasts here, can actually worsen PMS, cause our ovulation to disappear or skip cycles, can make your cycles really irregular, and they actually increase cortisol while lowering our metabolism. So that's not great. That's not what we want in our bodies. And I have a few specific concerns around intermittent fasting that I just want to call out and bring front of mind. And this is, again, with women's bodies in mind. And I'm specifically speaking from the perspective of someone who works with busy moms. So, really talking to the kind of person that works with me who is typically in some level of life is really full, overflowing, maybe a little bit in overwhelm, burnout, stressed out as a baseline. And even if you're not a mom, so many women are pushing past our capacity and are living in a deficit of nourishment and fuel. That's super normal in our society. So, my number one concern when it comes to especially busy moms using intermittent fasting as a regular strategy is simply nutrient intake, like getting in the fuel we need, period. Most moms are already under eating. Most women are already under eating. So if we shorten the eating window by even more, the goal here is not to eat less calories. The goal with intermittent fasting is just to shorten the window. But it is very challenging to eat enough calories in, like an 8-hour window or a 6-hour window. That's very challenging for most of us, especially if we're coming from a baseline of not eating enough calories anyway. And it's not just about calories, it's also about nutrients. Are we getting enough amino acids? Are we getting enough vitamin C? Are we getting enough fiber? Most of us already, the answer is no. And then when we shorten the eating window, it gets even harder. So that's my first area of concern is if we're intermittent fasting, are we undernourishing and underfueling? Because that is going to do more damage than any like metabolic benefits could outweigh. And, apart from the undereating piece, here's really my rule of thumb. If there are 3 areas of our health that are really impacted by intermittent fasting, and that is your blood sugar, your hormones, and your nervous system, specifically your cortisol and adrenaline cycles. So, blood sugar, hormones, cortisol slash nervous system. Now, if those 3 pillars of health are like pristine for you, those 3 pillars of health are thriving, are balanced, are consistent, you've had lab work done, things are looking great, you're feeling amazing, you may have a foundation in your body where intermittent fasting just adds to that fuel and you feel even better. That's beautiful. I love that for you. But the truth is, if there are any cracks in that foundation of blood sugar, hormones, or cortisol, intermittent fasting is typically just going to make the cracks worse. Intermittent fasting is going to cause bigger blood sugar swings. It's going to cause more cortisol dysregulation and high cortisol, which also increases our fat storage and slows our metabolism, and really can impact our hormones, particularly our progesterone balance. These high cortisol levels and lower nutrient intake, and then the blood sugar piece, it's all coming together to lower progesterone production. So for most women, we have areas of growth in those areas, right? The blood sugar, hormones, and cortisol. Most of us have places we can be healing and focusing there. And until those things are like top notch dialed in, usually intermittent fasting is not the answer. We may have a little bit of short-term success. I'm talking a few weeks, a few months, but long term, it is not sustainable. It's going to really deplete our stores and can cause even deeper imbalances in our hormones, in our stress cycles, in our nervous system, in our insulin sensitivity, all kinds of things. Plus, chronic nutrient deficiencies are not helping anyone in this piece of the puzzle. Now, one really interesting piece, though, that I do like to talk about is the idea of cycling your intermittent fasting with your menstrual cycle. Because as you've probably heard me talk about before, you're not the same person every day. Your body does not work the same way every day. You have four really distinct phases of your menstrual cycle, and throughout 1 month, your body responds very differently to its environment, to its nourishment, to its signaling. And while men's bodies operate on this 24-hour cycle, which makes intermittent fasting fit in really nicely for them, our bodies operate on a 28-day cycle, which is really different. So it does make sense that there are times of our cycle where intermittent fasting may be more supportive than others. So if you are somebody who maybe has intermittent fasted in the past and you really like it and you want to keep going and you're like, I hear you, Martina, but I feel good. I want to keep going. If that's you, or if you are curious to try intermittent fasting, but you want to do it in a way that is gentle and supportive for your body, you can play around with intermittent fasting with your cycle. So, what that would look like is only doing your longer fasts. I'm talking like anything over 12 hours, I consider a fast. So 12, 13, 14. I don't recommend women go more than 14 hours. Okay. If you're doing like 16, 18-hour fasts, bring it back down to like 12, 14-hour fasts. That's kind of my upper limit of what I recommend. But if you want to do these 12, 14-hour fasts, do them during your follicular phase. So the time after you stop bleeding through ovulation is a time where your body is naturally more resilient to stressors in general. We are more tolerant of cortisol, we're less activated by our nervous system, and your metabolism is also lower in this first part of your cycle. So you actually need less nourishment anyway. So there's not as big of a demand you're trying to fill. Your energy needs are not as high during this time. So if you want to try these shorter fasts in just the follicular phase, you can experiment with that for a few cycles and see how you feel. Your body is really the best indicator of what works for you. So give it a try in your body if you feel called into it and let your body tell you what works. I would put a hard stop on intermittent fasting during your luteal phase. Your luteal phase is between ovulation and your bleed. That is a time where we are much more sensitive to cortisol, much more sensitive to stressors. You're probably like nodding along because, like, yeah, in our premenstrual phase, we are much more sensitive to stress, right? Sensitive to stressors, more easily activated. Our blood sugar is also more sensitive. We are more insulin resistant in our luteal phase. So we can handle blood sugar swings much more steady in our follicular phase than we can our luteal phase, the second half of our cycle. So if intermittent fasting is impacting our blood sugar, we don't want to add that into the luteal mix because our blood sugar is already so sensitive in that time. Plus, in the luteal phase, your metabolism is higher. So you need more nourishment, you need more nutrients anyway. You're preparing for the bleed, you're storing up nourishment. It's going to be really challenging to get everything you need if you are restricting your eating window past about 12 hours. So, just to summarize, in general, here are my intermittent fasting guidelines for those of you who identify as a woman or who have a menstrual cycle or a body with a womb. You can experiment with moderate fasts, like 12 to 14-hour fasts, in your follicular phase only. Do not recommend fasting past 12 hours in your luteal phase and in your bleed. Okay, we're keeping it to the follicular phase. The other thing you can play with as an intermittent fasting strategy, if you want to make it work for your female body, is to experiment with fasting in the later part of the day rather than the morning. Because of the way our natural cortisol cycles work, the way our blood sugar cycles work, it is really important to get stable nourishment right when we wake up, within about 1 hour of waking. So if you want to intermittent fast, one option is you continue eating in the morning through about like 3 or 4 p.m. Maybe you have your last meal at 4 p.m. and then you do not eat again until, well, let's do the math, like 7 or 8 a.m. the next day, right? So if your eating window is between like 7 a.m. and 4 p.m., but you do not eat between 4 p.m. all the way through overnight, that can be more challenging for our schedules, for most of our daily lives. It's usually easier to skip breakfast than it is to skip dinner, but it is better for your body, for your cycles, for your cortisol, for your blood sugar, if you intermittent fast in that way. And then you can experiment with this afternoon into evening fast if you want to try to make intermittent fasting work for you. But the big banner, the big takeaway that I want you to hold on to from this episode is, unless you have a really strong foundation in your body of blood sugar balance, hormonal balance, and nervous system balance, intermittent fasting may make the cracks in your foundation worse. Okay? Can be a powerful tool for those in a male body and for anyone who has a really strong foundation and they're looking to just like activate to the next level. You could experiment to see how your individual body feels. But if you have any balancing or healing to do in your body, start there. Intermittent fasting is not going to be the thing that heals you, and it could make things harder for you along the way. And then the last thing I'll say, just because it's interesting and we might have some beautiful postmenopausal queens listening to this podcast as well, is that generally our bodies do work better intermittent fasting post-menopause. So this is a strategy that I use sometimes with postmenopausal clients. As long as we have a steady foundation, again, of blood sugar and nervous system balance, it may be something to experiment if you or if your loved one is listening and wants to know, is postmenopausal, because we don't have the same hormonal fluctuations and because our bodies are better able to tolerate it. Now, postmenopausal nutrition is a whole nother conversation, but this really goes for anyone trying intermittent fasting. When you are eating, you need to make sure that you are still prioritizing protein and fiber. This is especially true if you're postmenopausal. We really need high amounts of protein and fiber to maintain our muscle mass and to support our microbiome. And what tends to happen, because those are things that are already low in many of our diets, we're not getting enough protein or fiber. When we shorten the eating window, we get even less. So if you're experimenting with cycle syncing your intermittent fasting, switching up the time of day, doing it in the evening, if you're postmenopausal and you're trying this out, still prioritize protein and fiber every single time you eat to make sure you're not creating big gaps. But for the average busy mom, tuning in, just looking for ways to feel more balanced, to feel stronger and lighter in their body, to feel more energized. If that's you, intermittent fasting is not the way, my love. It is not the path to start with. First, we start by building a foundation of safety in the body. That does not come from creating cycles of fasting and famine. Safety in the body comes from steady nourishment, balance in our blood sugar, balance in our hormones, and really tending to the nervous system every step of the way. So let me know what questions come up from this episode. If you want to share your experience with intermittent fasting, I would love to hear it. I'm always so interested to hear what does and doesn't work for folks. Let me know in the comments or send me a DM over on Instagram. And I will see so many of you over in the Energy Leaks Breakthrough Challenge. We are kicking off April 2nd with the pregame, and then the challenge kicks off April 7th. So if you're hearing this episode in time to catch that challenge, it's $11. It is going to be a beautiful spring energy reset space for you to plug your energy leaks and reclaim your vitality. Let's go! I'll talk to you soon, love. Take care.